Hello, my name is Alice RL. I am a non-binary, transgender, Indigenous person. I love art, video games, cats, and teaching. By all means, a normal person. I have a job or two, pay my taxes, watch a lot of YouTube, and ignore my anxiety. That kind of normal. But I'm also transgender, often thought of as not quite normal. The other, the much other. So, transgender and non-binary. Those don't necessarily sound like words that are common knowledge, so I'd love to go over some definitions. And before anyone says that these words are made up, I will let you in on a secret. All words are made up. So, transgender. Person whose identity and gender are different from what was assigned at birth. Trans comes from the Latin for across or on the other side. Cisgender. Person whose identity and gender are the same as what was assigned at birth. Cisgender comes from the Latin for on this side. It is not a slur, it is a definition. Cissexism. Basic intolerance or prejudice towards trans people. For example, utilizing language that includes cis women who menstruate, but fails to account for trans people or non-binary people who also menstruate. Non-binary, person whose gender identity is outside that of the Western gender binary. And transphobia, bigoted hate or prejudice towards trans people. So, why these definitions? Well, some of these words are just not necessarily common knowledge. Some have been mistaken for slurs or just not understood. Today, I want to talk to you about the misconceptions of trans people. Before I go on, it must be said that the Western gender binary that we've adopted into our Canadian society is based in colonization. Does it work? No. And why bring up colonization as if it isn't the root of many of today's problems? Well, there have been and are cultures that have traditionally accepted so-called third genders. Very literally, transgender people have always existed, just possibly not under any terms you've ever heard of or understood. For example, in North America, there are the British people of the Métis, the Dene of the southwestern United States, who acknowledge 4 genders, and the Moose people from Mexico. The most well-known North American example of this are Two-Spirit people, now used as an umbrella term for an Indigenous person who identifies outside the binary. The Cree have 6 different terms for Two-Spirit people. The Ojibawe have 2, and many others, such as the Lakota and Navajo people, have language that has traditionally included those outside the gender binary. And of course, trans people are not just located on Turtle Island, as there are many cultures around the globe that have accepted and embraced those outside the binary. There is the Bakla people from the Philippines, the Fa'afafine from the Samoan culture, and the Warrior from Indonesia. These people existed and exist today. This is not some fad that 14-year-olds found on the internet and will tire of in a year. This is real people with real lives. And by not acknowledging that colonization had a huge impact in our misunderstanding of history, we continue to deny marginalized peoples their truths. So clearly, trans people are people. Our similarities with cis people are numerous, as with the aforementioned YouTube and taxes. But currently, our global population is around 2%. This currently outnumbers the redhead population at 1%. we denied healthcare, names change rights, or the rights for redheads to join the military, there would be outrage. There would be cause for alarm. Denying the rights of a group of people sounds extreme, but this is what has happened and does happen to trans people. Before we go on, I would like to say, Caitlyn Jenner speaks for like 2 people. So please don't use her as anything but an example that white privilege will still help out white women. And besides, trans people are varied and different as cis people, so the assumptions placed on us often come off as uninformed or bigoted. There is this idea that there are only 2 genders, that you can only be left or right. You can't even be more left or more right. You have to be one or the other, not even in the middle. This is so untrue. It seems that some people stopped learning about biology after grade 8 because this is sort of the side that only 2 gender supporters have settled at. Not only is gender a spectrum, but so is sex. This can be seen in everything from humans, lions, birds, reptiles, and insects. What we have been taught barely scratches the surface of what is possible. Another outdated notion is the idea that man is XY and woman is XX, when the truth is both can continue. There is a variety everywhere from 47XXY to 45X. And these are just people living their lives. They do not necessarily fall into this binary. And so we come up again of, well, this is such a small population. So why should we care? And then we're back at denying the rights of marginalized people because why? There's a small population? Another misconception is the idea that trans people just sort of popped up in the 1950s and, sprung from there. Well, sure, where's the research? Well, along with numerous other atrocities, the Nazis burned down the Research Center for Sexuality, a research facility that housed documents and research on LGBT plus people, including trans people. It was progressive for the time, but it's now destroyed, along with all that research. So, yeah, people have tried to study trans people. This isn't new. I will briefly touch on trans people and bathroom scare because I honestly find it tiring and brought on by nothing but fear-mongering. Bathrooms seem like this weird ground zero that cis people can lord over marginalized people, because this pretty much mirrors how gay people were treated in public bathrooms. Additionally, trans people have reported high numbers of bladder infections because we would rather hold our pee, get an infection, than have to potentially interact with a cis person. The most recent thing that cis people are trying to protect from trans people is sports. Now, I'm a trans person who just doesn't care about sports. Some do, I guess. For those who transition, some may take what is known as hormone replacement therapy, or HRT for short. This does a bunch of things to your body. For example, those taking estrogen, it can make your bones very brittle, and it lowers muscle density. Probably wouldn't give you an advantage in sports. On the other hand, testosterone grows muscle, hair, and pimples. It probably could give you an advantage in sports. So, knowing these 2 cool things, let me tell you 2 fun stories about sports. And by fun, I mean terrible. So, Dr. Rachel McKinnon is a professional biker. Cool. She won 2 out of 6 races against other women. Cool. She's a trans woman. Okay, that's cool. Because she's a trans woman, there is some sort of perceived advantage that she has over cis women. Basic math tells me that the amount of races lost to one proves she didn't have an advantage. But because of this perception, she is stalked, harassed, demeaned, all because she won 2 races and lost even more. On the other side, there was a transgender boy from Texas. He wanted to compete on the wrestling team. This boy was on testosterone. We know what that does. Because people suck, they decided to put him to compete against the female team. He wanted to compete against the boys' wrestling team, but was denied that. He won against the girls and was yelled at. Not only was he put somewhere he didn't want to be, but he was also yelled at for it. And so this prejudice doesn't just affect trans people, as cis women have already been attacked, refused service, and even put in a men's jail, all because they were assumed to be trans. Recently, Caster Semenya, an Olympic-winning runner, appealed a case where she would have had to take medication if she wanted to continue to compete. Semenya produces more testosterone than the average cis woman. Michael Phelps, Olympic-winning swimmer, produces less lactic acid than the average cis man, which gives him a perceived advantage over them. Where was the outrage over Phelps? If I put Semenya and Phelps next to each other and laid out their differences, I believe it would be pretty easy to see why there was outrage for one over the other. And this shouldn't happen. This is the extremely slippery slope we go down when we start denying trans people's rights. At the very least, if we deny the rights of trans people, then cis people who do not necessarily conform to our everyday standards of man and woman will also be targeted. They already have. So, why am I here? Other than I'm a pretty good public speaker and I'm trans. Well, trans people have an average suicide rate of around 50%. I am very open about my mental health and my being transgender. I have tried to commit suicide. I have friends who are trans who have tried to commit suicide. I thought that it would be better to not be here than to be in pain or to be denied by my friends and family. But it wouldn't. My death would become a statistic, just like my suicide attempt did. I'm here to educate you, to inform you, show you a side you maybe never seen before, help you become allies, show you my cool drawings. I wouldn't be able to do any of that if I was dead. So, what can you do to help trans people? Well, it's simple. Don't be a dick. It's kind of ridiculous how easy it boils down to something so simple, but not misgendering trans people, not harassing trans people, not killing trans people. It all contributes as low as that bar is. talk to trans people and realize that we are not only valid by historical means, but also by the Mayo Clinic, the Endocrine Society, the National Nurse Practitioners Association, and thousands of medical practitioners, hospitals, and universities. In 5 years, I hope that if this talk is looked at, it's either to laugh at or boo how poorly we treated trans people. I hope that we continue learning past grade 8 to become more caring and passionate individuals. Trans people are not here to replace anyone. We've always been here. There is no trans agenda other than the aforementioned watching of YouTube. We simply want to live and be afforded the same access you would a cis person. We are very much people deserving of love and respect as anyone. Oh. My name is Alice Arell. I'm a big old transgender. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.